Hello everyone and welcome to the Introduction to CSAM webinar. I've checked my audio so I know I'm broadcasting. If you can see me talking but you can't hear me, please just check your audio on your laptop or computer or mobile device. Since the last webinar, we've changed the software we use, so the video with me on, you can move around if it's in the way. So if I'm talking about something and my video disappears, mouse disappears by my video, you can move the video around. So this webinar is to introduce everyone to CSAM. So we'll run in two sections like all our webinars. So there'll be a main presentation from me, which will last 30 to 45 minutes, and there's time for question and answers at the end. Everyone's microphone is muted so you can hear me. If you have any questions in the control panel for the webinar, you'll see there's a Q&A, so you can ask questions in there or you can use the chat. You will be sent a link to access the webinar later, and at the end of this, I will be emailing 2 handouts to you all, hopefully which you find useful, and the survey I've turned off for this one, but that'll be back later. So, CSAM is the Connected Steps Analysis module. It's designed to help schools who use Connected Steps to analyse their data. So it only analyzes data from connecting steps, just to be 100% clear. So in this webinar, basic introduction to CSAM with the different reports, using the group filter and the filter, the grid view, how to export data to Excel. Then I'll quickly go into what report should I run first, how to identify and fix bad data, importing from your MIS, managing diversity group, and then a couple of different options. I'll be going through all of those through this webinar, and the bit I'll just over the handouts, these I'll send you later. So the first one is the CSAM guide, which basically just talks you through what all the different reports do, and the other one is basically just a couple of pages on how to identify and fix bad data. So when you first run your reports in CSAM, often you see your data looks really bad, you're not sure what to do. Generally, it is really easy to fix, and just that document will talk you through how to do that. So currently, CSAM is available for the P-Levels, National Curriculum, Early Years, the Autism Progress. We're just testing at the moment CSAM for engagement steps, primary steps, progression steps, and for the Scottish schools, steps to excellence. So that will be out soon. We are working at the moment. And what I'll do now is I will close my PowerPoint and I will move into CSAM. So I'm using our dummy account. So I've got lots of bad data because we keep breaking it. So it's a great chance to show you what bad data looks like and how to fix it. So to get into CSAM, it is the pie chart. So straight into there. What we then do is you choose the framework you have. So I've got a number of frameworks where I see multiple icons. If you've only got 1 or 2 frameworks, you'll only see the icons for the frameworks you have. Just to note, there are certain frameworks have reports specific to them. So within Autism Progress, there is Autism Progress report, and there's a couple of different reports. Same with the EYFS, there are a couple of reports specific just to the EYFS. I'm going to do my reports in the P-Scales National Curriculum Levels because I've got lots of data here, which makes life really easy. Because you can see what it would look like or should look like. So with CSAM, we've organised the reports into 3 distinct groups. You've got headline reports at the top, you've got some individual reports in the middle, and then group reports at the bottom. So with the headline reports, these are going to be the ones that everyone dives into and has a look, but the idea with these are to give summary information. So you will see I've got Pupil Premium Attainment report here. I have the same name report down here, but the difference being the Pupil Premium and the headline reports will give you overall subjects. It will look at the whole of English or the whole of maths, whereas down here I can drill down into the reading, the writing, spoken language, and so on. So you may choose to share the report, Pupil Premium report, with governors or advisors or anyone else like that. but you can then use the report from the group reports to bring out more information, drill down, identify good progress, bad progress, where you need to support, and talk about that as you're presenting those reports. So there's a lot of reports. You can constantly. Okay, I'm just going to work out which screen is sharing. One person has commented they can't see my connecting steps screen. They can only see my slides. Can someone just confirm if they can see the reports in CSAM? Okay, I'll stop the share. I'll switch it and then come back. Okay, hopefully you can now see. Can you see CSAM now? Oh, not quite sure what happened there. Sorry about that. So what I was just going through, I've got headline reports at the top, group reports at the bottom, and individual reports in the middle. You will see within the group reports, there are certain reports which are repeated, so Pupil Premium, the cohort, the tracking grids, progress over a key stage, all of that is repeated. The difference is being the ability to drill down. There are a couple of other reports up here as well. It comes down to what you want out of the system. So we've given you lots of reports, what suits you. So we've given you options. So with the Pupil Premium Attainment and the Cohort Tainment, they are looking at the progress taking into account prior starting points, whereas the two progress reports both start at 0. So what I'll do, I'll run the Pupil Premium Attainment report so you can see how this works. So as I've already got the Pupil Premium selected, I leave this as all students. I choose my area. So as we're doing the headline reports, it's the overall English. I then choose my time frame. And as I'm using historic data, I'll just get that chugging away. So what it's now doing is it knows either from what I've set up previously or what I've imported from IMS, who are my Pupil Premium pupils. And I'll show you how you can do that later on. So it knows who my Pupil Premium pupils are, it knows who my Pupil Premium or my non-Pupil Premiums are, and it knows the whole school. So it's now going to work out through all those children over that 4-year period, the average progress for the Pupil Premium, the non-Pupil Premium, and the whole school. Now I've got some bad data, which I'm just going to filter out. This is often a filter I do for schools, so that should now make sense. So what this report is showing me, so it's Pupil Premium Attainment, all students, looking at English between those two dates. So on here, I've got 3 different lines. I've got my green line for the people in the group, so my Pupil Premium, my grey line for the people not in the group, so my non-Pupil Premium, and my blue line for the average whole school. So that blue line is important. Here it's pretty equal, so I'd say 50% of my children are Pupil Premium. If it was much closer to my Pupil Premium, it would show me the majority of my students are Pupil Premium. And I can see by scrolling along, I can't really tell if I've closed the gap or not. The dates along the bottom I'll come to later, but you are in control of the dates that are used. So within CSAM, we use key dates. So you're in charge of these and you can set these, and I'll show you how to do that, but it means you can choose the dates that suit you. There's a couple of little things I'll show you. So you can filter the different lines just by clicking on the boxes here. If I just wanted my Pupil Premium, I can do that. If I wanted my Pupil Premium versus my non-Pupil Premium, I can do that. If I wanted everyone. So nice and easy to play with that. I've got a tick box here, only show students present for the entire date range. So with mobility, there's a lot of schools you have, especially when you're looking over a 4-year period, where children aren't present for the entire 4 years. When you actually see how many children are present, there's not a huge number. So it kind of doesn't give a good representation of your data. What I can do by unticking that, on this one it doesn't really change too much, but what that will do is any child who has arrived or left within that time frame would be included, whereas when it's ticked, only those present for the entire 4-year period are included. Where that comes in useful is you may target progress for the coming year or couple of years for your cohorts. At the end of that time frame, when you look at it, you haven't made those what you expected. If you turn that on, you can hopefully see that you have made the progress you expected, whereas if you turn it off, that may show that that's where you haven't made it, and that's because your cohort's changed. So maybe you had more able leavers leave and more less able children arrive, or some other things will happen, but using that can give you an interesting reflection on your data. You have got the ability to put values on graph. It may be that's when you want to turn them off, so it's easier to see the different lines. Okay, so you've got a couple of options there. What I will then move on to is the group filter. So what we did with the group filter is that's looking at my pupil premium, so those in the group, those not in the group, but that's all I can really see, and I'd have to produce a lot of graphs to sort of drill down into my pupil premium pupils. So what I can do is with my group filter is I can split the pupil premium pupils into different groups. So if I click on years, what that will now do is show me the average pupil premium progress pupils in year 5, year 6. As I'm moving over my mouse over it, it's highlighting the line on the graph. And that allows me to see that my year 9 pupils, the green line with the filled in circle, are below my year 7 and year 8. So it gives me a question to ask why that data is down there. And again, with this, if I'm happy with certain ones, I can drill down and choose which ones I want. So I can do it for years, I can do it for key stages, I can do primary need. The main I will come back to at the end to explain what that is. But it allows me to drill down further. So that's what the group filter is about. With the filter, so I've already applied a level filter, so I've got a load of data which hasn't been baseline that somebody's just put in for me, which has broken my graph. So if I bring that back in, my data changes a lot. But what these filters allow you to do is I can choose children who started on a particular level, who ended on a particular level, particular group, key stage, year, or gender, and I can stack those. So at the moment, I'm looking at those who start on particular levels. I can look at just the girls or just the boys, so I can see how the different groups compare. So in reality, there's lots of things you can do. What is right for each school is up to you to find. A lot of the groups the government like you to look at don't really make any sense with special needs, so they're not always that much point in doing them. And you may have to actually create your own groups to find sensible groups you want to use. The last item here is report options. So what you can do here is control the scale you used in the graph. So there I'm zoomed. I can zoom from the start. What I can also do is do all. Where that comes in, it's not really great on the computer. It's when you're printing reports out. If every report is zoomed in, people may not realize the scale is changing on the left. And it may look like your SLD pupils are making the same progress as your MLD. Whereas by actually fixing that to all, you will see some pupils may be up here, other pupils may be working lower down. So it just makes it a bit clearer when you are printing it out, the scales on the graph and where children are working. So that's a sidebar, and that generally works the same on all the different reports. So sometimes some of them are missing, but the idea, just like with the rest of the software, we've tried to standardize that on as much as possible. On a majority of reports at the top, you've got a chart or grid. So generally we default to the grid, to the chart, so you can see the graph. But behind that, if I click on the grid, you can see the data behind the graph. So I'm just going to zoom out a bit because I've zoomed in so I can show the software better. But you can now see here, I've got my grid. So I've got my name, my class pupils are in, their start date. If they've left, it'll be included in there. The group member, so this is anyone who green is in the group I have asked for. So that'd be my pupil premium, and my not in group are my non-pupil premium. I then have where the pupil was on the start date, where the pupil was on the end date, and that is all averaged out at the bottom. Okay, so I can sort, as you can see, by any of these columns, so I can put them in any order I want. So I can put them by the pupil premium and then non-pupil premium, the highest achiever, the lowest, so I can sort by any of those columns. I also have a couple of tick boxes here. So extended pupil information, that brings in additional information about each child. So I can then sort by class, year, UPN, key stage, all that sort of stuff. If I tick view extended data, what that will do is turn this into a really big grid. And what this does is show me all the data points in between the starting point and the ending point. So you can actually see we're in that time frame. So if there is a dip, you can identify at that point what is the cause of that dip. All of this information can be extracted out into Excel. So on a number of reports, you'll see an extract data button in the top right. If I click on that, what that will do, it will create a CSV file. So if I click on save, there's a file. If I click on that, that will open in Excel. So you can see here the data. I'll just zoom in so you can see it. So with all these, there's the information straight from Excel, from CSAM. So when we do this, we put the information of what the report is showing you at the top. We then have one version with all the data in, and at the bottom we then have a slightly different version. So it contains the same information, but what we've done is we've given you what we call our formatted data. So here I can read 16% of P6 and moving on to 58%, I can read that, that's nice and easy. However, I can't do any maths with that using the computer. Whereas with the bottom one, I can do some maths with that, so I can work out one column, take away the other, and convert that into a percentage increase. So I can do maths with that if I want to and do anything I want. So you can do stuff there in Excel. We are going to do some stuff on that in the future. So just hopefully ways to give you a rough idea of expected progress on our new progression steps, but it will be a very rough indication, which I will talk about later. At the bottom with the averages, there's the formatted version and the computerized version as well. So where that extract data is not in all the different reports, what you can do if you start at the top left of the table is you can highlight and you can copy and paste the data out that way as well. And if you tick those, that is reflected when you extract data as well. So that's the cohort attainment, or pupil premium attainment. So the cohort attainment is exactly the same report, apart from with this one, I haven't pre-selected a group. So if I did all students, it would do the whole school. So what I would need to do here is choose one of my groups. So I got registration, my subject groups, my diversity groups, year or key stage. So those are all kinds you can create yourselves. Under diversity groups, we have a number of preset ones. So EAL, whether in the EHC, ethnicity, first language, free school meals, gifted and talented, health, looked after, pupil premium, religion, SEN, the SEN type, service, child and education. And then after that, a number of groups you can create yourself. So all of these can be imported from your MIS. So if I click on SEN type, I can choose one of the SEN types. I can choose a primary, secondary, and additional need if I really wanted to, although you'd probably end up with a very small group of pupils. But whichever group you choose, it will always compare that group to the rest of the school. So I think I've got some MLD pupils in my school. So if I do that, what that should do is compare my MLD pupil progress compared to the rest of the school. Put it away. So you can see here, so my greens are my MLD pupils. You can see they're making lots of progress. My average for the whole school is down here, and my non-MLD are down here. And the fact that the blue line is much closer to my non-MLD, it means a much higher proportion of my students are not MLD. So I can see how that changes over time. So you can do that for any of these standard groups or any group you want to create. So they're the two attainment ones. When I look at pupil premium progress, so I'm going to run the same report again. So all students for the same date range. I'll do the diversity group, I'll do my MLD. What this will do is, instead of starting at their prior attainment point, is everyone will start at 0% progress. So especially with the pupil premium, when you've got two lines which can be parallel, and it's hard to see which one ends out on top or if there is a difference, by everyone starting at 0%, it's often easier to, so you can see the huge amount of progress MLD children are making. And for some reason, my non-MLD are not included. But you will see that if the pupil premium children are in fact making more progress than your non-pupil premium, then on this report, the pupil premium would be on top because they have made more progress. It also helps when you've got two different groups with a much higher, further apart. The progress by reducing that difference makes it easier to see. I have had a couple of questions come in by the chat. I will answer them at the end. I'm not ignoring you. I will come back to those. So those reports, nice and easy. Primary need attainment. I'm not going to go through all of them because otherwise it'll get very repetitive looking at the same sort of thing. But primary need, what that will do is it will show you all the different primary needs in your school and how they compare. So I can pick primary need. I can do that will be on all students. I would then choose that date range and a subject. It will then compare all my different primary needs and how the different needs are. I see a different line for each primary need. What I need to quickly check something in the options. I will come back to this in a second. Yes, that's fine. What I will do is I will just run the main cohort attainment. So we'll just, I realised I changed something just before I started, so I'm just going to sign out and sign back in. With the main cohorts, whether or not I said it's important for pupils with SEN or not is a different matter, but often government and Ofsted like to look at certain groups when looking at data. So they will cover the boys versus the girls, the free school meals versus not free school meals, the looked after versus not looked after. All those groups it likes to look at and would like you to know how that makes a difference in your school. Whether or not it does or doesn't is a different matter. So the idea with that main cohort, for that reason, what this report does, it puts all of them on one graph. You probably want to run it. I've just had a question which relates to the last graph. You will see all the primary needs at the same time. So you'll get one line for each primary need. I'll come back to the other two. So what I can see here, again, on the left, I've got all the different lines. So I've got the whole school, the males versus the females, not SEN versus the SEN, free school males. So I see all my different groups. And generally what I'm looking at is which one's at the bottom, which is somehow my not free school meals are not looked after, whereas my free school meals are looked after at the top. And the other one at the bottom is not looked after. So immediately, whether or not it makes a difference, I know who's at the bottom. And it's not a judgment, but it does give me questions to ask. Now, what I may want to do is turn off the boys, the girls, and the whole school, and just look at the free school meals, the looked after, and the different combinations and how that affects my children. See, there's lots of things, little things you can do with this. All nice and easy. I've just noticed one of the questions is when it comes to printing, in the top right, just with everything else, that's the printer icon. And that is how you print the report. So we generate the PDF. So that is how you print the reports. So you can see here, it includes all the background data as well. So because my data goes over multiple time frames, it's done multiple pages. So we'll create a PDF with all the information on, and then you can print out just the pages you are interested in. Because I'm looking at such a long time frame, it split that over 2 pages rather than squeezing it all onto one page. So that's the main cohort. As I say, I don't think you're ever going to run the report and print it all with everything on, but you can turn off the ones you don't want to focus on the ones you do want to look at. Then, of course, you've got the progress as well. So English, maths, English and mathematics, they're quite simple. So that one will show you all the areas of English and maths on one report. So again, you can see how your different areas compare. So on the English, I can look at the reading, the writing and the spoken language all together, see where the most progress is being made, the highest in terms of attainment, and I can filter for different key stages. So you can get a lot of information from those ones. Progress over year and progress over key stage. We're going to change these based on feedback over the next 6 months. So what this does at the moment is you pick a subject, you pick a date. So this one will look back over the last year and group the pupils by the amount of progress they've made. So at the moment, it picks its own groups of values. What we want to do is change it so you can set your own groups. So you can set your own values and percentages. So with my really bad data at the moment, because I've got a load of people, some was added on with no baseline, 77% of my children have made no progress, 11% have made 10% progress, 3% have made 20, 30, 40, and 50. So thanks to someone adding the pupils, my graphs are all broken and don't look great, but it is a good way of sort of showing the amount of progress children are making. But we want you to allow you to set your own values on these in the future. So that will do it over a year. I can do it over a key stage. I can also do it as funnels. So the funnels is kind of a mainstream way of looking at things. So generally, I wouldn't use those for your SEN. In mainstream, they use a phrase like 90% have made expected or above progress, and then they've drilled further down. I don't think that makes much sense with special needs using that language, so I wouldn't use those. We then have a couple of tracking grids. So the yearly tracking grid is quite good. However, as the government's just changed everything, it's going to take a while to build up some data to really make use of this. The idea is, again, you're choosing your group, you're looking at English, pick your date, and then how many years. So with this, I've run it for 3 years, and it will churn through and look at the last 3 years worth of data for that chosen date. And what it would do is it will look at the progress between points, and also is there an increase or decrease in progress. I will zoom in slightly. So you can see here in year 1, this pupil went from 63% of P5 to 67% of P6, so they made 104% progress. The following year, they only got to 98% of P6, so that means they only made 31% progress, which is a reduction of 73%. And then the following year, they only got to 11%, so that's only a 13%, which is another drop of 18%. So for that child, there's a constantly reducing amount of progress, whereas another child, they increased their rate of progress and then it dropped off. Whereas another child, the amount of progress reduced, but then they got back up again. So it's quite good looking at this and looking for that red to see where pupils have made less progress, then have you be able to bring that up the following year. So that's on the annual one. And with these ones, again, these tracking grids are looking at the overall subject. So there I was looking at English, or I could look at maths. And this one allows me to look at between any 2 dates rather than a year. So I can choose 2 dates and look at the progress between. So the headline there, generally, hopefully quite simple to understand. With the group reports, we've got a number of pie charts at the start. So if I do pupils by primary need, I can choose my date, click display, and it will show me the percentage of pupils and the different needs. So somehow 4 of my pupils are MLD, but 32 have no needs. So I haven't updated those yet. So what these reports are designed to do is whenever I go to conferences and people try to explain their school, what they like to do is get you to understand the school in terms of their data and the challenges they're facing. So the idea with pupils on level, pupils by primary need, looked after, pupils with the AL and SSD, it kind of gives you an idea of the difficulties they're facing, so the number of pupils with the AL, sort of levels they're working on, the different needs. So you can therefore, once you've understood all that, you have some kind of expectations on the sort of progress within that school, rather than just looking at a progress number and saying that's not good enough. Here it will help you understand where the children are and what can be expected. So again, after that, you've got the attainment, the progress, you've got the very similar reports, but this time I'm now choosing English, and then I'm choosing the reading. So with the previous one, I looked at the overall English. Here, I can now choose the reading, the writing, and the areas within. Again, very similar, doing the same sort of stuff. There are a few reports in the middle, which is our attempt at looking at data in a different way. The feedback we've had from these has been really positive, so we're going to do more of these in the future, because I think they're really interesting and often a much better way of looking at progress. So first one I'm going to go into is progress over time, which is my favourite report out of all the reports we do, because for years people have talked about pupils making progress on different levels and it not being picked up. So what this allows me to do is I can pick a pupil, so I'm picking Lorraine Baines, I'm picking my time frame, so I'm going to be doing January 2017 to January 2018, looking at her English writing. So here it will work out what level she was on the first date, and look at the progress from that level and the levels above for that progress. So what that works out is it's identified that Lorraine's working on P6 in English writing, and in that time frame she's gone from 52% all the way up to 77%. So she's made 25% progress, which you may or may not be happy with, and often that's all you'll see in a lot of reports is you just look at that one level. However, what this now looks at is on the level above, so P7, she started at 13% of P7, but she got all the way up to 61%. And even on the level above that, she's gone from 2% to 21%. So it might be actually on P6 within the writing, there's something she's struggling with. It could be the actual handwriting, the physical process. It could be the spelling. It could be something she's struggling with. But in the other areas of writing, she's making progress. And if you only looked at P6 for progress, there's not a huge amount. Whereas when you add the other areas in, there's actually a lot of progress going on. It's just not where the government likes it to be. So where you've got children not making much progress, and also where you see them getting towards the end of a level, so whether that's 70%, 75%, you should really look at the next level for progress, because they're obviously going to be starting on that next level. You'll know they're making progress in the school. And this is one of the reports which will show what you know. It shows they're making progress. So yeah, that's my favourite for that reason. Progress within a level. So this is for children making really, really low amounts of progress. So when you're not really looking at what they've mastered, but actually looking deeper than that at moving through the different levels of experience. So for this one, I've picked English Reading 2C for Foxy, and I can see in that time frame not only how the masters have gone up, which is a typical way of looking at data, but also how those different levels of experience have increased. So the fact that actually she's encountering skills and they're moving on to being mastered. So it's not just the masters are going up, and you may find actually that for one pupil, it's the actual gaining skills is increasing. So with that, you can actually see that although they're not mastering stuff, they're getting close to doing it. It might be a case that they can only do it in a particular way, or they need that little bit of support to do it. But you know they're almost there for that child. That is a big, huge step. And the other one we want to do, we have done, and these are all starting points. And if you can ever work out a good way to use this and different ways of showing this, please feedback to us, because I can't find in my head great ways of showing this in a simple way. So what this report is about is kind of combining those last two reports into one. However, there's just too many things to look at. So if I run it for reading, on the 1st September, that's where Foxy was. So we started at 2C, which is her current level. And you can see what she's mastered. So you've got the levels going up. You can see what she's mastered, where the different levels of experience are on the different levels, and the fact she's encountered lots of things at level 5, but that's as far as she gets. So I get to look at that for September last year. Then I can change it to this year, click display, and hopefully I can now see how those greens have shot up, and there's progress across multiple levels. So at the moment, I can't do that on one graph. I can't think of a meaningful way of doing it. So you currently have to do it on two, but that's the sort of challenge we're facing. We're trying to look at data in a much more complicated way, and it's not simple to do. One of the things we will be doing within the next year is we'll be doing a group version of this progress over time. So this was the one looking at progress on different levels. And what we will be doing, I'll just quickly do a version, is we will be it's because we've got to make sure we don't mislead information. So you might have a child, so if I use the same values as the previous screen, and I'm going to call this balanced progress. And the reason I'm calling it balanced progress, because that is the progress where you're bringing everything up in a balanced way, so you're not kind of missing anything out. What I might say with that overall progress is that actually she has made 90% progress over 3 levels. So that way you can see she's increased on her current level by 25%, but there's actually another 65% progress she's made over the next 2 levels. If I just use that number, that 90%, you might think they've almost moved up a whole level, whereas actually on their current level, they've only moved up 25%. So doing it this way will actually be able to do a whole group of pupils. And you can actually see that one child may have made 25% on the current level, another child may have made 50% on the current level, but only made 75% over 2 levels. So you can see the difference in the spikiness of the different pupils' data. So again, it's just getting away from a very two-dimensional way of looking at data into actually understanding the pupils better and looking at their progress in a much more realistic way for them. So hopefully with that, I've covered a couple of the different reports. I've used the group filter and filter. I've gone over the grid view and exporting data to Excel. Next thing I said I'm going to cover is what report should I run first. Well, what I always do is that whenever I go to a school, generally what I often spend half of the CSAM training do is going over baselining. So the first report I always recommend running is all the one right down at the bottom, profile key date tracking grid. This is a real simple one. So I want to have a look at progress from September last year to September this year for English reading. So on this, I can pick any time frame you want. It's up to you. And it also comes down to times on frameworks and time using connecting steps. Sometimes I go to a school who've used connecting steps for 6-7 years, but they haven't baselined properly. It's not been used correctly. And in theory, we could go back through 5 years worth of data, but if it's not reliable, there's no point in going that far back. So it's working at how far to go back and how much it will take to fix the bad data. So what I've got here is a screen full of really bad data. What you'll see in the handout I've sent you is I will send you, is there's generally 4 really typical ways you will see the bad data. They go into 4 easy groups. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring in the PDF version. So I've already highlighted them, which makes life a bit easier. So you can see here I've got 4 different sets. So number 1 is always the easiest to spot, 0% of P1 to 0% of P1. So the great thing about this report, it tells me where they were at the start, where they were at the end, and their progress. So what's great about that is I look at that and go, okay, that's completely wrong. So if you're not sure with B squared, unless you put a baseline in, every child will be right at the bottom. Okay, so it doesn't matter what I've entered on P7, P8, unless I've told the computer that's where that child is working, then the computer will only be watching P1 for progress. Okay, so when you come across that number 1, P1, 0% of P1 to 0% of P1, generally it tells you straight away there's no baseline. What you can do is then use the individual reports in connecting steps. So here I would go to level summary, I would pick one of these children. So I'm going to pick just a random pupil. So I've got my mini-me. And what this report shows, hopefully you've all seen this, this screen shows me all the subjects down the side, all the levels at the top. And here I go. I'm going to use art and design. So with this row, I've got percentages up here, and I can see the fact that P4 is at 51%. It's probably where mini-me is working. However, because I haven't told the computer that the pupil's working on P4, the computer thinks that pupil is working at P11. So all I have to do is baseline the level below. So I have to mark, if that is where they're working, the level below complete. When you do this, you've got to be really sensible. So with this report, I'm running this report from the 1st of January 2017 to the 1st of January 2018. So for my baseline to work correctly, I've got to put the date before the 1st of January 2017. So to do a baseline, I can click complete here, level complete, and then I need to make sure it's on or before the 1st of January 2017. As soon as I click save, you will see that that 0% of P1 jumps up to 51% of P4. Okay, so that's all you have to do with the baseline. And now I've done that, it will now be watching that P4 for the progress. And generally, what happens when someone hasn't baselined? So on that number 1, generally what happens is it's looking at the wrong level. So as soon as I put that initial baseline in, that may jump up to 0% of P4. That may show 51% of P4. So that child will go from 0% progress up to 51% progress. So that one is the easiest to fix, and it's the easiest to spot. There's no baseline at all. And generally, you can just do those steps I went through. So going to that individual reports, level summary, looking at there, you can see generally if there has been data entered where that child is working and go from there. Sometimes if it's not clear where the child's been working because the teacher been working on multiple levels, you will need to go and talk to that teacher to identify where that child is working, but it's a nice, easy one. Number 2, 22% of 2C to 20% of 2C. So there's no progress, but there is a baseline, and they've made some progress on 2C. Why is there no progress? I come across this one quite a lot, and the biggest cause generally is when a pupil moves from one teacher to another, and the second teacher doesn't kind of look where the pupil's working. They don't use the current level button. So on the individual assessments page, if you hit current level for that child, it would have taken me to 2C, so I know that's where the child is working. What some teachers do is they open up connecting steps, they pick English, they pick reading, they pick a random level. If they see boxes, that's where that child's working and that's where they're entering data. So what you may find with that number 2, either the teacher is recording information on the wrong level, or they may not be recording information. Easiest way to check that is going back into connecting steps, going back to individual reports, is going to assessments mastered. So for this one, I can pick my pupil, I can pick the same time frame. So from January 17 to January 18. See if I can click display. So the first report I was looking at reading, so all I have a look at here is, okay, so where have they been recording stuff in reading? This is my random data, it's all really bad. But the idea by having a look here, what you might see is according to the, here that child's working on 2C. When I look here, all the skills have been achieved on 2A. So therefore there won't be any progress because the teacher's either working on the wrong level or the child is baseline, but there needs to be have a conversation with what the data says and what the current teacher says. So that's probably the most complicated one because you can't just fix that quickly and easily. You will need to have a conversation. Number 3 is also a really easy one to fix, and you see this a lot. So whenever you run a report, and you see it in connecting steps, if you see a huge high percentage progress, you see 650%, 700%, whatever, generally what's happened is there was no baseline on the first date. So and you'll see it a lot of the time in the pupil summary. So if I run this one, I'm sure somewhere I'll have a horrible high value for something. Everything's 0. It's even worse. All you have to do with that, when you are running that report, is that tells me there was no baseline on the state of the report. So that report I ran from the 1st of January. So the fact they've moved up to 44% of P7 tells me there is a baseline, or they have completed a level, but it's not before the 1st of January. So I would just go back to the level summary, and it might be this one here. It was achieved on the 1st of January 2018. So it might have been the previous one that I need to mark as complete. But generally, it will tell you, okay, by having it that way, there is a baseline, but it's not set early enough. So often what happens, especially if you're running a report from the 1st of September to the 1st of September, that's when you often see this. And the reason being is the teacher didn't know where that child was on the 1st of September. So when they actually baseline the child in October or the end of October, they went off and marked P6 as complete. What they did is they did it with a date in October. So that means that child was on P11 throughout September, throughout October, and then suddenly jumped up to being on P7. So when you set that baseline, when you are doing that baselining on this screen, if I want to mark P4 as complete for computing, I click complete, I say level complete, but I make sure I change this date back to the 1st of September. Okay, and by doing that, that child will come in on P5 and the progress will only be monitored on P5. If I had marked that level as complete with today's date, what that means is up until the 9th of October, they're at P11 and then they jump up to P5. So it's always best to change that date back to the 1st of September. One of the things you'll find in an update we did last year is this calendar drop down is now affected by their start date. So if they started on the 4th of January or 4th of September, you won't be able to go before the 4th of September. But that also means if you run a report before from the 1st, they won't be included because they weren't there in the school at that time. So if you are trying to go back and it won't allow you to go back beyond a certain date, it's because that is their start date. So yeah, number 3, also really easy to fix. Number 4, generally whenever I see a 0% of a level in the 2 column, it generally tells me I've got bad data. So whenever you baseline, you'll always start off on a 0%. So they could have baselined them on 1A, but then there's been no progress since. So 0% of 1A at the start, they've been baselined. 0% of 1A at the end, there's been no data entered. Or for some reason, the teacher's been working on a different level. There are a couple other things. So with that one, it's generally working on a different level, or they've put it in the wrong place type thing, or the teacher hasn't entered any data. Whereas with this one, where it's 22% of 2C to 22% of 2C, you've also got to take into account, generally wouldn't be that higher levels, but if you're working down in the low P levels, although they might not have mastered anything, they could actually be moving from engagement up to gainer skills and understanding. And that is when those reports I looked at on the individual section come in. So if you are looking at pupils making no real progress at the low P levels, you may want to look at progress in a different way to just looking at the straight current level progress. So this is a document I will email out to all of you, and it does go through how to fix all those problems, and it also mentions about sorting and filtering. And I'll cover that in a second, what I mean by that. So with the sorting and filtering, a lot of the time I go to schools and we bring up a report and we look at it, and it's not really telling us a huge amount. If I just look at the data as is, it often won't show me much information. What I want to do is have a play at sorting and filtering it. what then might happen is I might suddenly see something which wasn't there before. And there's a couple of simple rules. I'll bring up that PDF file just to give you the very simple rules. And what I have put in is, without knowing your children, without knowing your schools, there will always be children who don't fit into these rules. So the first one is sorting by groups. Are there any groups which you wouldn't expect where all the pupils in that class are making significantly less or simply more progress than other groups? So I've gone to school, and generally it's quite an obvious one. And I'll be doing it here because I filter by group. I suddenly get all the children in the marvelous group don't have a baseline. So it immediately tells me where my issue is. There's a teacher who hasn't recorded or hasn't baselined. So with that sort of stuff, it's generally nice and easy. You can filter, sort by the group, suddenly hit a load, which we're in a certain group, and you might find that's your new teacher who hasn't been trained properly, or there may be somebody. It's a great way of just sorting by group. Other thing is then combining the filtering and sorting. So if you filter to a particular level and then sort by date of birth, so put them in age order, you'll then see all the pupils who've got to the same attainment level, but logic says the younger children should be making more progress. So because they've reached that level earlier. So if I get rid of, so I'm going to do P7. So I've now got all my children on P7, and you can do it on different reports. If I put that one, so that pupil's made about 50% progress, that pupil has made about 50% progress, they're making loads, that pupil's made 30, that pupil's made less. So yes, so my actual idea of actually the other way around, the younger children are making minimal progress. But the fact it's taken Ward and Norton 5 years less to reach the same level, they should be making a lot more progress. So it's all very general rules. There's lots of very general rules which you can apply, and generally you can sit there and go, no, that doesn't work because that child's needs will cause this and that child's needs means. But it is always a good idea to have a look and just ask the questions of what that's showing you. But I have been to schools and seen some really interesting things. So a school I went to where they had outreach classes, so pupils were going back into mainstream. So they were not in that school, they were set around a number of satellite schools, and all the children in those classes were making significantly less progress than those actually on the main school site. And they had to go away and ask why. It could be the fact they're in the mainstream setting and they're going back to that sort of thing, and transitioning back into mainstream might be more stressful and having an effect on their progress, or it may be the teachers working in the units away from the main school have less aspiration and less support. So there could be many reasons, but the important thing is to ask that question. Just in a question, if you're sorting the data and make a mess of it, you can always resort it. So the default is it comes in sorted by name, so you can always go to that and resort the data. And in terms of filtering, I can just turn that filter off and it will always bring it back. So yeah, so with me, I would always run that profiled key date tracking grid. That would be the first port of call. Generally what that throws up is all your historic problems where you've not been using it well, where you've got baselines missing, and just make sure that when you are fixing baselines, make sure you are making sure teachers are aware. So generally children will need baselining when they join the school or when they transition from one framework to another. So if you've got a primary school, you need to make sure your year one teachers know how to baseline your data, so that you get a good starting point and everything is realistic from there. And I would also, a lot of schools do data collection 3 times a year, 4 times a year, 6 times a year. I would have a look at that report a week later for the core subjects, just to make sure people are entering data. So what you don't want to do, and I've seen schools do it, where I've gone in to help them with data at the end of the year and find out that some teachers haven't entered data since September. So I would always use that report every half term or every term, how often you collect data, just to make sure that I have got progress for the majority of my children's. If there is no progress, go and ask the question why. It's not a judgment, and that's the important thing with data. It's not a judgment, but you should go and ask the questions why, and they might just say, no, we're working on this, or I forgot to do it, I'll do it next week. But by doing it earlier, it's the whole early intervention thing. By asking those questions earlier, you won't get to the end of the year and be scratching your head on why there's limited progress or why your data is bad. You'll be able to look at that data confident that the data is good. Once you've got that, it's then what suits you. So what you shouldn't do is print off a load of reports, stick them in a book, and you're finished. That's not what the graphs, that's what the data is about. What I should be doing is using this data, so running reports, looking at reports, trying to understand, ask questions about it, and then go, okay, so that's that, so how can we change that? And then ask your question how you can change that and put that into action. So often when you get a CSAM, you can use the reports, the filters like year, key stage, and all those sorts of things. But to get the other stuff, you need to set those groups up. So what I'll just do is I'll go into myB². So those who haven't seen myB², this is an admin portal we added on about 18 months ago. And the part of the reason for that is for ever since. So we've pulled out all the user management, the group management, and the student management into here, just to make life easier. So if I go to manage students, I can see all my students in a lovely big list. If I edit one of those children, so if I edit Jacob, I get a screen of information. So the top section, name, registration group, all the different stuff, that's all the usual stuff. When children leave, you can give them a leaving date. We then move on to the extended information. So I will zoom in so you can make sure you can see it. So with the extended information, we've got EHC, their religion, free school meals, EAL, gifts and talent. You've got all of these things you can add. Now, all of them down to the parents' information. If I turn free school meals on, that pupil is now in the free school meals group. So I don't have to go and add into group just by doing that and setting the primary need as ASD. He is now in those three groups. So it's nice, quick and easy way of doing it. When it comes to health, you can see here we have a lot of different health things we can do. Whether or not you want to use them is up to you. Some of them you might sit there and go, actually for children with this, there's a big difference in attendance or the support they need, time out of class, therefore that's going to have an effect on their progress. So what you may want to do is then put all the pupils with that condition in that group, compare those to the rest of the school and show the effect of their condition and the support has on their progress compared to their peers. If you want, so you have got that option. But instead of doing this all manually, most of this information is held in SIMS or your MIS, so you can do it from there. So what you can do is, if I'm just going to quickly create a test file, so just give me a second. You can import it all from your MIS. Now, I know SIMS really well. I've been doing it for a while, so that's all nice and easy for me. Now, what you can do in SIMS, and I don't know if you can do it in the other systems, is you can design a report and then save it. So what that allows you to do is set all the settings up, create the file as you need it, and then whenever pupils change, so either once a year, once a term, however often you want, you can then bring that information in easily and quickly. You can actually set up pupil admins, so the person in charge of SIMS has a log on, so they can import that without taking up one of your licenses. I'm almost there. So back to CSAM. So if I click on import and I click other, it will then ask me to find my file. So I should have quick access, pupils.csv. Does this file contain headings or not? So I click next. What you get here, so someone asked about data bridge. As long as you can get a CSV like data bridge, which I'm 99.9% sure you can bring this in, and it's a really flexible system. So you can see this is what the file is in the column. So that's going to be the first name, that will be the last name, date of birth. So I can just go through registration group and just match those fields. So pupil premium. What you'll find is if you select Sims here and do the same, what you'll see is I get a lot more options. So although if you're not importing from Sims, if you just select the Sims way, you get a lot more things you can import. If you just follow through that process all the way through, it will then bring in all that information for you. So setting up your groups is really simple. So that will set up all your preset groups, but you'll probably find in your school there are some groups which are only of interest to you, which make a big effect on you. So in some independent schools, what you actually have is children from different local authorities, and they may come in and want to look at their data. So you may want to create a group for the different local authorities. You may be trying a new approach to something and want to see if that has an effect on progress. So you can create a diversity group to monitor that. So on the Manage Group screen, if I click Add New Group, it doesn't do anything. Try that again. Where's my internet connection gone? But it can't be because you're all here. Right, back to here. Add new group. So I may want to call this the old new phonics approach. I'm going to try something else just in case that may work. I can set an effective date. I always just pick the start of the year. And I set the group to diversity. Click save. I now have my group called New Phonics Approach, and it has no pupils in it. So what I now need to do is edit that group, and I can add students, and I want to add in Mini-Me, Austin Powers, and Nigel Powers, and so I can just go through and add all the pupils I want to that group. Click save, and then give me the list of the pupils in that group. Click save. I now have a group I can look at where it will compare those 3 children to the rest of the school. So whatever your reason for creating a group, I always joke, just because people go, oh, can I create a group for this? The answer is anything. So if you want to create a group for those who can floss, those who like Lady Gaga, those who watch Strictly, whatever your reason, if there's actually a real reason, not silly ones, you can create a group so you can compare the progress of those against the rest of the school. The handouts do tell you how to do that. That one, the diversity groups, it doesn't. I will add that to the handouts. But yeah, they're the easiest. So importing is always going to be the easiest. I would recommend making sure you have your UPNs in. So we will always match on the UPN. If the UPN isn't there, we will match on the first name, last name, and date of birth. So if one of those is wrong, incorrect, or spelt differently, we won't match the pupils. And what you'll end up with is you could end up with a Jonathan Baber on the 6th of July and a Jonathan Baber on the 7th of July. One will have all the assessment data, one will have all the data from Sims. If you make sure the UPN is on, even if one of these is wrong, it will get updated and changed. If you do end up with duplicate pupils and you're not quite sure what to do, always give us a call. We can help you and advise you on what to do, but you won't lose any data. It's all positive and all good. So that's the MyB² part for pupils. If I go to manage users, so with CSAM, you do have control over who has access to CSAM. So by default, the super administrator will always have access to CSAM, but they can give access to CSAM to whoever they want. So if I think Rhiannon Morris should have access, I can turn that on, and Rhiannon now has access to CSAM. So it doesn't just rely on the senior leaders. You can get individual teachers involved, phase leaders, subject leaders, so they can access CSAM, so they can look at the data themselves. Hopefully the data is easy, so it's not a burden to them, but it helps them ask questions of the teachers they're working with, and it means when you come together, they have an idea of how the data looks before they come to the meetings. In connecting steps, so there are a couple of options. If I go to system administration and I go to options, there's a couple of things here which will have an effect. So at the top, we have these key dates. So you can see one of them, so the 1st September, starting date is ticked, so that's the start of the school year. You can add or remove as many of the dates as you want. So what I've gone for here is the start of the school year, end of the autumn term, end of the spring term, end of the summer term. If I want to add one in for November, I click on add, 1st November, that goes in. Okay, so I can add as many or as few as you want. Okay, and that is what, when you look at progress over time, that is what they'll be used there, and also in choosing the dates. I've also got here curriculum and ages. So one of the things we found when if anyone ever used GAP, you may run a report for the early years, but it included absolutely every pupil in the school. And what you then had to do is go and filter it. What we've done now is we've got these curriculum ages for each framework. So for the early years, that works for children from birth up to the year they turn 5. National curriculum P levels from the, and I've changed this, so there's pupils the year they turn 5 up to 25. Progression steps, engagement steps, and primary steps, you can control them all. So if it's a case of you actually only use national curriculum P levels up to the end of Key Stage 3, you can adjust that age to 14, and then your Key Stage 4 pupils won't be included in the data. But it just allows you to define for each framework which pupils will be included in the data. So that's generally everything. As I said, what you will probably find if you're new to CSAM or you've used it but not been that confident, I would do is go in here straight into the profile key date tracking grid, run this report and have a look at your data. This is the best way of checking your data is realistic, because until your data is realistic and is actual representation of what's going on in your school, so everyone's contributed and everyone's got realistic data, only then you actually be able to look at the other reports and actually decide if there are any issues, or if you're not happy with something, what you're going to do. Until you've got the actual, all the contribution from all the teachers, you won't really be able to do much with that information. You'll be working on data which is unreliable. So that's generally everything. So if I just go back to the PowerPoint, so hopefully what I've covered, so I've mentioned the handouts. So as I said, at the moment, CSAM is available for the P levels national curriculum. It's available for the early years and the autism progress. What we'll work at the moment, which we're testing, is CSAM for engagement steps, primary steps, progression steps, and steps to excellence. And what I will just mention, if any of you use the engagement steps, when you have a look at this, certain reports, so the English Maths and the English and Maths reports, won't make much sense in the engagement steps because you're not covering those. What we will have is another one called Cognition and Learning, which will do the 7 areas of engagement. So there will be a few different reports in there, and it also reminds me within the Autism Progress has its own reports as well. So if you are using that, it is worth a look at the Autism Progress report. I haven't got a mock. I've got a mock-up of it, so I can show you what it looks like. I'm just going to bring that up. Just fly through. So that's the old one. There we go. So it will kind of look like this with the Autism Progress. So around the top, we've got the 4 areas, so communication, social interaction, emotional regulation, and flexibility of thought. And then we've got 3 different colors. So the darkest color is what level have they got all the skills. The medium color is what level have they got half the skills. And the lightest color is what level have they got a quarter of the skills. So you can kind of see within different subjects how spiky they are, and you can see that social interaction is lower than the other areas, but it's not all of social interaction, it's only parts of it because other skills are up here. So we do have a report in Autism Progress which does that, which is that one there. And we will be doing, not immediately, but we'll be bringing out some of them into the engagement steps when we have a view on what works with engagement steps. So I'm hoping, I'm saying it soon, is we're testing it. We've got a final few things to go through, and we are hoping that CSAM will be out around half term. So schools can start to look at data in the new frameworks. So that's the thing for that. So just a summary, as I said, before you can analyze your data, you need to make sure you've got no bad data. So the handout I'll email out to you all this evening. Use that to identify the bad data and what to do next and how to fix it. Use the profile key date tracking grid report after your assessment points to ensure quality of data. So you don't have to do much more than that, but yeah, 3 times a year or 6 times a year, go look at your reading, writing, number, sort of stuff, and just make sure that everyone has entered their data. If you can fix it every 6 weeks or every 3 months and chase people, it's much better than chasing someone for a whole year's worth of data. Work out which reports work well for you. So you'll find that the reports showing progress in a traditional way may work for 80% of your children, and you've got to work out what works with your governors and other people. But also is then looking at those new reports, so the progress over time, looking at the progress across different levels, and the progress at the different levels of engagement to sort of work out for you what works. And make sure you're asking questions of your data. If you look at a graph and you don't understand it, drill down into it. Look at the individual pupil's data and go, okay, why is that there? That's what this data is all about. Producing the graph is the first step. It's not the last step. When you have that data, you should be able to ask questions of it. And that's why we've got all those group filters, the ability to sort and filter your data. So you can just go through and sort of identify what data you're not happy with. And as I said at the bottom, data does not give you a judgment. We've been asked quite a lot over the last couple of years for doing targeting, expected progress, and it's something we're trying to find the right way of doing targeting, and we're not sure if we can because it is very individual, so it's going to be very hard to do, especially with the different levels and ways of looking at progress, the linear and the non-linear progress. But also the idea of expected progress. We will be giving you, for schools working on the progression steps, we will be giving you a really rough idea of expected progress. But the whole point is, it is just a really rough, and you shouldn't hold people to it. And there should be no judgment if children haven't made that progress. If you've expected 40% progress by the end of the year and they've only made 30%, it doesn't mean they failed, doesn't mean the teacher's failed. You've got to go understand why that child hasn't made that progress. If they've reached their full potential, then they still made good progress. So that's really important. So the next steps, If you don't have CSAM and you're just listening to find out what it does, you can contact us for a free trial. So with CSAM, you can use it for a month or so to see how it works. If you are going to do that, make sure to get the most out of it, you do that importing data from your MIS, so you get the most out of it. As I said, check what additional information has been imported. If you go into MyBSquared and edit a pupil, you will see if it has been imported, all those different values for different pupils. If all of that is red and there's no information there, it hasn't been imported. Run the profile key date tracking grid report to identify bad data. Think about what groups you want to look at. So the governments have their groups, the free school meals and not free school meals. If that's not relevant to your school, what is relevant? What groups do you want to look at? Create those groups. Try the different reports out, identify which ones work for you. Identify who will use CSAM. So I've been to a lot of schools where data generally relies on one person. And they're the person who builds the reports, looks at the reports, and what often happens is other people don't really look at it. They're told how their data is. I think really that more people should be involved in that data, and if there is a person in charge of it, they should be doing more than others, but other people should still be contributing. They should be asking questions rather than relying on one person doing it all. The big question we're asked a lot is, what is good progress? And that is going to be the next webinar we run in a month's time, so 7 p.m. on the 13th of November. I'll be talking about that and how there is no simple answer, but how you can kind of work it out in your school, and what sort of things you should be telling Ofsted. And I think the big thing with that, if you know a child is making good progress, if you know from talking with the teacher, talking with the parents, all through that they're making good progress, just because maybe a graph doesn't agree with you in the government's eyes doesn't mean they've not made good progress. And I think it's having confidence when Ofsted come in saying you know what good progress looks like in your school and how you measure it. And also generally Ofsted only look at a few areas. They might look at English and maths. With SEN, that's only part of what you're working on with a child and the part of the progression they're making. They're looking at the 4 areas of need. You're looking at the preparing for adulthood. There's lots of different things you're looking at. And I think Ofsted needs to be thinking about that. And sometimes it's just reminding them there's lots more than English and maths. And if you want to register for that, you can go to our website at the top, click on the webinars button on page, scroll down, and you'll see the registration for what is good progress. So that's kind of the end of the webinar. In your Zoom meeting control panel, you have got a Q&A button, so you can ask questions through there, or you can ask questions through the chat. So if you have any questions, do ask them now. I'm just going to go through all the questions I've been asked just to make sure I can see if I've answered everything. So yes, MIS is, as long as you can get a CSV file out of your MIS, it can be brought in. The only one I've come across so far which doesn't work is the Scottish version of CMIS, which is completely different to the English version. So if you're a Scottish school and you use CMIS, your CMIS is just annoying. And it's a long-winded way, but all our English schools, as far as I'm aware, all the MISs work. Primary needs, you'll see all of them. So I've hopefully covered what the CSAM works with in terms of our frameworks. Yes, hopefully I've covered it. So if you do have any questions, please use the chat or use the Q&A to ask your questions. Or if I haven't answered a question you've asked, please let me know if you'd like more detail. And if you are struggling with CSAM and you would like some help, on our website, we now do these online meetings, which generally work in a very similar way with this, but it allows me to spend one-on-one time with you, me in my office, you in school. Generally, we can share our screen, and what we should be able to do is also you can share your screen with us, so we can help you go through your data. Sometimes the data looks really daunting at the start. If you've got bad data, it looks really bad, but generally it's not hard to fix. It's just knowing, okay, what dates should I use? What am I fixing? What am I changing? And just knowing what data is easy to fix and what would actually require you to go back to the teacher and ask for their professional judgment. As I haven't any more questions, I'm going to end the webinar. So thank you for everyone for coming. I said if you've got any questions, you hopefully got my email. So please ask away. You will get a copy of the webinar sent to you, and also I'll be emailing out the handouts as well. So thank you for attending.